This video pertains to section 6.5, which is about solving quadratic equations using the zero factor property. I'm going to go through a few examples and show you how that works. Let's look at the first example. Let's solve the equation 5x squared minus 8x minus 4 equals 0. To solve this quadratic equation, we first need to factor. And once we factor, we use the zero factor property to figure out the solutions. So to factor, we use the trinomial method. So we need two numbers, two integers, p and q, whose product is 5 times minus 4, which is minus 20. And the sum of p and q should equal to the coefficient of x, which is minus 8. Now going through the list of factors of minus 20, we see that products or factors of minus 20 are 1 and negative 20, but those do not add to negative 8. Minus 1 and 20, again multiply to minus 20, but do not add up to negative 8. We have 2 and negative 10. They multiply to minus 20 and they do add to negative 8. So we know that P is 2 and Q is negative 10. So we factor as follows. 5, remember the leading coefficient, we're going to need to multiply it and divide it accordingly, times x minus 2 over 5 times x minus 10 over 5 equals 0. Simplifying, we have 5x minus 2 over 5. 10 over 5 is 2, so x minus 2 equals 0. Now we have a product of three factors, namely 5, x minus 2 over 5, and x minus 2, all equal to 0. By the zero factor property, at least one of them must be 0. We know for sure that 5 is not equal to 0, so it must be at least one of the other two factors equal to 0. So this boils down to writing x minus 2 over 5 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. Solving these linear equations gives x equals 2/5 or x equals 2 as the solutions to our equation. Now let's look at the second example, which is about solving the equation x cubed plus x squared minus 20x equals 0. If you look at this equation, it's not quadratic, meaning it's not degree 2, but rather degree 3. It's a cubic equation. Now, looking at this equation, notice that the left-hand side has a common factor, or a greatest common factor of x. So let's factor that out. If we pull out an x, we'll be left with x squared plus x, and what remains from minus 20x is minus 20 equals 0. Using the zero product property, we know that x is 0, or x squared plus x minus 20 equals 0. So we already know that x equals 0 is a solution to our equation. And to figure out the other solutions, we need to solve this quadratic equation. So to do that, we factor, then we use the zero product or the zero factor property. So here we need two numbers, two integers, p and q, that multiply to 1 times negative 20, that's negative 20, and they add up to the coefficient of x, which is 1. Now, if we go through the numbers or the factors of minus 20, we see that 1 and negative 20 doesn't work. Minus 1 and 20 doesn't work. 2 and negative 10 doesn't work. Negative 2 and 10 doesn't work. They do not add up to 1. The next factor is 4, so what about 4 and negative 5? Doesn't work. However, negative 4 and 5 do work. They multiply to minus 20, add up to 1. So, x squared plus x minus 20 equals 0 becomes x minus 4, x plus 5 equals 0. Using the zero factor property, this means x minus 4 equals 0, or x minus 5, x plus 5 equals 0. And that means x is 4, or x is negative 5. So this equation has three solutions: x equals 0, or x equals 4, or x equals negative 5. Next, let's look at the equation 10y squared equals negative 5y. We start out by moving everything to the left-hand side and make it equal to 0. So 10 y squared plus 5y equals 0. There's a 5y in common between those two terms. We factor that out. If we pull out a 5y from 10y squared, what remains is 2y. Notice 5y times 2y is 10y squared, plus 1 equals 0. Using the zero factor property, this means 5y is 0, or 2y plus 1 is 0. Well, if 5y equals 0, 5 is not 0, so it must be that y is 0. And if 2y plus 1 equals 0, this means that y is negative 1/2. So the solutions to this equation are y equals 0 or y equals negative 1/2. Finally, let's look at the equation 36x cubed minus 25x equals 0. We start out by looking at the greatest common factor between the terms 36x cubed and minus 25x, and we see that this greatest common factor is x. So if we factor that out, we're left with 36x squared minus 25 equals 0. Now that's equivalent to x equals 36x squared. We can write it as 6x squared minus 5 squared, which, recall, this is something of the form a squared minus b squared, and we can factor it as a minus b, a plus b. Here, 6x is playing the role of a, and 5 is playing the role of b. So, we have x, 6x minus 5, 6x plus 5 equals 0. Using the zero factor property, we have x is 0, or 6x minus 5 equals 0, or 6x plus 5 equals 0. So this means that x is 0, or x is 5 over 6, or x is negative 5 over 6. So this equation is a cubic equation with three solutions: x equals 0, x equals 5 over 6, or x equals minus 5 over 6.